Well, thank you, friend. Shabbat Shalom. Good morning to you all. It's quite interesting. Some of the people who, regularly watch the show, they take a look to see what guitars are hanging behind me because they know that every so often I change them and I'll get an email that says, hey, I saw Rocky was there, or I saw this one was there. And I have one regular viewer who always likes to guess whether I have been recording in the morning or in the evening. She says I look and I talk differently depending on whether it's morning or evening. Maybe I'm just a little more tired as the day progresses. Anyhow, I did say good morning, so there you go, friends. Good morning to you all. It's great to be here. It's always fantastic to see all of my friends who really love the show. And we're going to continue with the same stuff we've been doing all along. We try and appeal to everybody. And as I mentioned last time, we've begun the countdown to the High Holy Days in the festivalist month of Elul, the month of introspection and reconciliation, the month in which we prepare ourselves for the 10 days of judgment. And as a reminder, here are some key things you may want to consider during not just this month, but friends, these are things to keep in mind in how to live your lives year-round. Take stock of yourself. Examine your past behavior and see what mistakes you might have committed. We've all committed mistakes. And think about how you can be a better person in the year ahead. You may want to make a list of changes you'd like to see you inculcate. Think about how you can concretely begin to implement them, like a New Year's resolution, when you swear that you're going to get in better shape and lose weight, and you go and you join a gym. Whether you go or not, it's up to you, but the concrete step is the, I'm going to do this. Examine your relationships. This is the period traditionally when we resolve past relationships and ask forgiveness for any wrongdoings. It's also a fantastic time to begin working on building new relationships with the people in your life. You may want to make a list of the relationships you would like to improve, and again, think of concrete ways that you can begin to implement those changes. I think Bob Dylan put it best in Saving Grace. If you find it in your heart, can I be forgiven? Guess I owe you some kind of apology. I've escaped death so many times. I know I'm only living by the saving grace that's over me. Friends, there is no shame in asking forgiveness. It is one of the great gifts that you can give yourself and anyone that you have ever harmed or who has ever harmed you. Examine your relationship with God. Traditionally during Elul, Psalm 27 is recited. The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? And we have talked a lot about fear and how we create fear and all the things fear does, and how the whole, concept of Passover is to overcome fear. And sometimes during our introspection, we approach the High Holy Days asking that age-old question, why do good people suffer? I think we all can find the little things that we have done, but we have a much harder time with what may be bigger things, or reasons why some of the things in our lives are not going as we wish. Friends, I will remind you that the Talmud actually talks about something called Yisurin Shel Ahava, afflictions of love, a rabbinic concept which says that some suffering is the result of divine love and a means of helping righteous people become more humble or do more good. And as we approach the High Holy Days, I review what's known as the 40 questions of the assessors, the questions that can be found individually. In the Al-Chet prayer, in the Hashem, chest pounding, we are guilty confession of Yom Kippur, don't wait. When you know that you have done someone a wrong, approach them. The forgiveness we ask God for on Yom Kippur is for our spiritual transgressions that relate to spirit. We are expected to approach humans directly. Do it as soon as you realize the hurt. Don't wait. Well, it's way past midnight and there's some people all around, some on their way up, some on their way down. The air burns and I'm trying to think straight, and I don't know how much longer I can wait. We had a great question about last week, friends, from Reggie. regarding the community justice and involvement in execution, and what happens if a witness lies and is willing to strike first. Well, it could happen. But what was also in that Parsha, Reggie, that we didn't talk about was a slight modification of the lex talionis, the law of retribution, the eye for an eye law. And this particular version was directed to the witnesses. And it said that if they were to falsely accuse, they should suffer the same punishment that they hoped for the other one to suffer. And this is what was believed to help ensure that false witnessing did not take place. Thank you, Reggie, and all of you who had questions or comments. And thank you, Nanette, for that fantastic suggestion of yours. I certainly do not know if anything will ever come of it, but I am very excited by the prospect, and it gets my mind spinning in new directions. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, once again, we have a fascinating Parsha to examine. It talks about what happens with war captives. It examines rights of the firstborn. We've talked about some of those before. Laws about sexual relations, sacred prostitutes, laws about marriage and divorce. What happens if you have more than one wife and you like one wife more than the other, and it is assumed that you have more than one wife? The very strange levirate marriage situation, from the Latin levir, for brother-in-law, yabam in Hebrew. The non-mixing of things, like men's and women's clothing, crops that could be mixed and therefore considered sacred, linen and wool, and a myriad of other items. It's all here in Kitetza, when you'll go out. When you'll go out to battle against your enemies and you see among the captives a woman of comely features, and you desire her, and take her for yourself as your wife. Friends, there is only one other place in the Torah where you find that phrase, comely features. It is the epithet attached to Joseph when he becomes the object of his Egyptian mistress's lustful gaze. The ancient world saw captive women as the rightful due of the victors. We may never have had the Iliad and the story of the anger of Achilles if Briseis were treated differently. Friends, this Parsha is about the sensitivity to the humanity of the captured women. It opens with a law that provides for human rights. These captives are to be allowed to mourn the loss of their own families. And so a set period is instituted to allow their mourning for 30 days, the biblical standard period of mourning. And the soldier is not permitted to rape her, and that is the word used, rape. And she has full rights of divorce. Even after you marry the woman, you are considered to have abused her. And the word used is inha. That same word is for afflict, degrade, and for rape. And it reminds us of the whole concept of the Egyptians degrading the Israelites and of the Egyptians letting Israel go. You see, Israel celebrates its own release and learns to have compassion for others. It's like a future projection of morals. This was extremely unusual in this world. You would think we could only have moved forward from there. As George Harrison said, try to realize it's all within yourself. No one else can make you change. And to see you're really only very small and life flows on within you and without you. And friends, if you don't want her anymore, you must let her go. You cannot sell her. You cannot get profit for her because you degraded her and you brought her down. And when a man has two wives, and it's assumed a man does have two wives, and one is loved and one is hated, and the hated one has a son first. Note, son, not child. That son comes first and gets double share. It's the law of firstborns. And friends, it's interesting because this law was not followed by any of the patriarchs. Not by Abraham with Ishmael and Isaac, not by Isaac with Esau and Jacob, and not by Jacob with Reuben or any of his other children. And you better watch it, kids. If you're rebellious, not listening to dad and mom, you are to be taken and stoned, and not in a good way. I'm not sure at what point the parents throw their hands up and say, he doesn't listen. But rabbis were sufficiently uncomfortable with this, and so it virtually was outlawed by the time of the Babylonian Talmud. This is another Parsha, friends, with a disjointed series of laws, which you can see. It goes here and it goes there. And I'll remind you again, Deuteronomy is different. It's the Reader's Digest of all the laws in the other books, only with differences. Enough differences you can't always be sure which one to follow. But also some have some fantastic expanded explanations. And even though it's somewhat disjointed, there is an overriding theme in this parsha. And it is the one we opened with: human rights and dignity. Now, Deuteronomy 22, it's all about caring for your neighbor's property, which fits right in with all of these things that we're talking about. And it basically outlaws the modern philosophy of finders, keepers, losers, weepers. Remember that from when we were kids? And then it goes on to list this unbelievable, strange mixing of things. And I don't really get how the two flow together with the take care of your neighbor's stuff, and then you can't mix all of this. But hey, who am I to question why? It's all in the one section. And it begins, there shall not be a man's item on a woman. It is considered abhorrent to God. Friends, is this just about cross-dressing? Many consider this to be the anti-cross-dressing section of the Torah. What about tefillin, or kippas, or talit? All of these are taken to be traditional men's spiritual accoutrements, but we have all seen women wearing them now. Well, believe it or not, this whole section could have to do with an ancient Hittite text which prescribed cross-dressing as the first stage in a cure for impotence. And so this section could have been put in to distance the Israelites from pagan ritual. Oh, to have access to Mr. Peabody's Wayback Machine and go and see why some of the rituals that we have are actually there. Friends, the Torah is fantastic with all of the stories and the rituals, and its embedded command to examine it freshly in each generation. And sometimes our growing knowledge of history allows us to break through the illusions of truth and to see another perspective of why some of the things are what they are. This same section that we're looking at goes on again to ban taking a mother together with the children, and we've talked about how this may very well be about the violation of the order of nature, the destruction of life, and the inability of a race to reproduce, a far cry from the simple mixing of milk and meat. And we are also told not to mix certain seeds in the vineyard, because it makes them holy, and holiness is restricted. It's forbidden to everybody, even though we had already been told that we're a holy nation and that everybody is holy. Certain mixtures are divine and not allowed for everyone. And there's a further list of things not allowed to be together, such as plowing with an ox and ass. And I get that. They're not quite the same type of animal, and they're certainly not the same size or strength. Or the wearing of wool and linen, which some believe is because that was for priestly garb alone. And again, these are things we've had to guess because we're not sure. And then Deuteronomy 22:12 is taken to be a repeat of Numbers 15:38. You shall make yourself tassels on the four corners of your garment. Except here the word is gedalim, tassels. And in Numbers it was tzitzit, fringes. And here it is not mentioned as a mnemonic tool, but in Numbers it was. There are changes, friends. And friends, two very strange prohibitions are mentioned in this parsha. The first is the one that prohibits a bastard from entering God's community, even in the 10th generation. And the Hebrew word for this is one we all know, mamzer. But it's not a bastard per se. It is specifically the child of incest or one of the other forbidden sexual relationships. And the other is a Moabite will never be acceptable up to the 10th generation. And yet a few weeks ago, we read the book of Ruth, the story of a Moabite who married an Israelite. And when he died, chose to live with the Israelites and to follow their God. My friends, she was David's grandmother, and therefore the progenitor of the entire royal line of Judah. Now, not everything that we read makes sense. And so we have had to interpret and we have had to examine. And we have taken this to mean, and the rabbinic understanding is, that since women take the religion of their husbands, this law applied to males only. And while these were forbidden and were considered abhorrent, Moses tells the people they are not to abhor the Egyptians, because we were aliens in his land. Despite everything that happened with Egypt, we are not to disdain them. And we see repeatedly the orders to give aliens the same rights and protections as citizens and friends. This takes us back to our opening of this parsha being about human rights. One of the great prime directives of Judaism is not to do to a neighbor what was hateful to you. We see changes take place. This book is a little bit different, even though all the laws are repeated in one form or another. Friends, remember, the Bible is not about God. It is a book concerned with the interaction between the deity and man. It's not about the nature of God or the origin of God, or where God may happen to be. It is a description of the personality of God vis-a-vis mankind. And the story that captures that so well is the one from Exodus 34, the scene of the ultimate human experience with God when he is described as being torn between justice and mercy. It is where we are told he can be merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in kindness and faithfulness. This becomes the picture of a God who can get angry, but does not stay angry, who sees the vastness of human wrongdoing and threatens to wipe them out, but does not wipe them out. He is a God who forgives, who is compassionate, and here he is concerned with the treatment of captives and the poor and the downtrodden, and the phrases we see over and over again, the widows and the orphans. But we are also told out of the blue to remember what God did to Miriam on the way out of Egypt, with a warning to be watchful against behavior that would bring about the same circumstances. That is leprosy, which we know was not leprosy. Friends, Rashi understood her crime to be lashon hora, that slanderous gossip that kills three: the person who speaks it, the person who listens, and the person about whom it is told. It is a great reminder, friends, do not participate in this as either the teller or the listener. Not now, not ever. And if you do, ask forgiveness. Now, last week, in Deuteronomy 18:21, one of the most important questions in the Bible was asked: how shall we know? And this question can be asked every week and every day. And it's applicable to almost everything you come across in whatever sacred script you choose to follow. How shall you know? There's a psychological point that people may miss the obvious and turn towards the comfortable. And sometimes the comfortable is the belief that there is more to something than it simply appears. We quote this parsha often the same way. We quote it as being about the law of divorce, but it is not the biblical law of divorce. The absence of marriage and divorce procedures is used as proof that there was an oral law given along with the written law. I hear the dogs are about to join in. The reference here is to something called Sefer Keratud, a scroll of cutting off. Keratud is not the traditional biblical term for divorce. Scholars believe that it pointed to a ceremony which involved severing relations, right? Sometimes things are what they are. Friends, keep in mind one thing. The divine interest is not about the ceremony, but about the relationship and about the treatment of the people involved. The same is true of funerals, bar mitzvahs, of saying Kaddish and sitting Shiva. Those are rabbinic, not divine, and not ever mentioned in the Torah. God provides very few ceremonies outside of the sacrifices made at the tabernacle. You can't do these things wrong, right? Don't let anybody tell you do them wrong. So how do you know? Follow your own hearts. follow your beliefs, friends. For we take for granted the truly important things in life, like peace, freedom, mental and physical health, and spiritual choice. Yes, we have a large tradition of laws, of customs, of explanations, of exegesis. But trust yourself. Trust yourself to do the things that only you know best. Trust yourself. Trust yourself to do what's right and not be second-guessed. Have a fantastic week, friends. Thank you for joining me. Examine yourself, as we are told in this parsha, to truly care for others. Care for yourself. Be well, be happy, be blessed. Big week coming up for you next week, Bob. We're all, pulling for you. Love you all. Shabbat Shalom. Get ready. Start making your preparations for the high holy days. Examine who you want to be. Love you all. See you soon. Take care. Bye.